taught that orders were absolute. Clarity, chain of command, no questions, no emotion, no doubt. A true son of Krieg obeys without pause, even when the voice giving the order is already dead. The first sound we heard was static. Not unusual, not at first. The trench Vox relays sputtered constantly. War's weather choked the lines. Ash storms, ozone pulses, radiation squalls. Nothing we hadn't endured before. But this wasn't the usual buzz of interference or feedback rising from a damaged battery coil. This was shaped. Words, almost. A voice that didn't belong in the world of the living. We were huddled in the eastern communication trench of Sector Damaris 13, barely lit by trench strobes. The night was soaked in that sulphurous yellow fog that never truly lifted or moved away. It coated our lenses, fogged our optics, turned breath to syrup inside clogged respirator tubes. Corporal Kraus was on Vox watch, shoulders squared, breathing steady through his rebreather's iron-slit grill. He paused mid-report, tilting his helmet toward the speaker unit embedded deep in the trench wall. Then we all heard it. Every man in the dugout froze as one, breath locked in place. A distorted male voice rasped through the speaker in fragments like flayed parchment dragged across razors. Not language at first, syllables dragging through pitch and reverb, scrambled by warp dust interference storms. But something in the tone cut through. Something beneath the static, recognition, reverence, horror. Reinforce, Sector 49 Delta. Hold the line, Colonel Halbrecht. Repeat, 49 Delta. The line went dead. A moment passed, then another. The only sound was the hiss of our respirators in silence. No one moved, not even Kraus. I stepped forward, boots sinking into the oil-slick trench mud like stones in a corrupted river. Repeat that, Kraus, I said. Play it back. Now. Do it. Kraus adjusted the dials with gloved fingers, visibly trembling under the weight of what he'd heard. The machine whirred, coughed, spat, static, but the message didn't replay. It was gone, erased, like it had never existed. I glanced at Sergeant Bors. He hadn't said a word, hadn't flinched since the voice began. But I saw the muscle in his jaw tighten behind his respirator as if chewing tension. That name, Colonel Halbrecht, wasn't a common one. And Colonel Halbrecht was dead. We'd buried his remains 2 weeks ago after the detonation at Outpost Noventa cratered the sky. He had been vaporized by a plasma rupture from his command bastion in Sector High 6. We collected what was left, part of a shin bone, a melted Aquila, and his dog tags. We knew it was him. We held the funeral ourselves in silence beneath the ruinous sky. So why the hell had his voice just given us orders through a trench-line Vox receiver? Kraus finally broke the silence. It was him, he whispered, eyes wide behind smeared lenses. Sir, it was his voice, I'd swear it. No, Bors said, shaking his head slowly like something ancient settling in his spine. No, Colonel Halbrecht is with the Emperor now. But that was his voice. I don't care if it was the Emperor himself. Colonel Halbrecht is dead. Kraus was silent after that. The trench groaned with the weight of fog and pressure, like the world itself was breathing. I moved toward the field table, brushing snowing dust off the cracked and flickering map slate. I found 49 Delta, a forward trench, long abandoned, supposedly destroyed in an artillery sweep 10 days earlier. It had no active Vox link, no standing garrison, just a red X marked non-viable sector. Why would the Vox play a ghost order? I asked quietly to no one in particular. Bors didn't answer. He didn't need to. Krieg didn't believe in ghosts. But we did believe in orders, and when they came from a colonel, living or dead, we obeyed. I felt something twist in my gut. Not fear exactly. Not yet. Something older. Just the knowledge that something sacred had been violated. Orders are supposed to come from men. This one came from the grave.
Sergeant Bors straightened.
Squad 47, gear up. We're moving to reinforce Sector 49 Delta.
Kraus hesitated. Sir, what if? Firmly.
Orders are orders, guardsman.
Bors turned toward the dark exit of the trench, where fog licked the metal firing step. His silhouette merged with the gloom.
We move in 15.
I didn't argue. None of us did. That's the Krieg way. Even when the ground drinks voices, even when the Vox speaks in the tone of the damned, even when we know that what waits in the next trench isn't a battle, it's a memory. And maybe something worse. We packed our charges, topped off our cell packs, checked our respirator seals and munition belts. No one spoke, not even Kraus. We crossed the parapet at 0400. Lights out, comms silent, bayonets fixed. The trench behind us faded into silence, just another scar in Krieg's endless corpse. Ahead lay Sector 49 Delta, and the kind of quiet that only lives in places forgotten. The fog was thicker than it had been the night before. It clung to the earth like oil, choking our mask vents, distorting distance and motion. I could barely see Sergeant Bors 2 meters ahead, his silhouette just a ripple in the grey. Even the trench lamps behind us looked like candle flames drowning in stormwater. The land between was cratered and slick, a graveyard of steel and broken helmets. I recognized the shape of a Lehman Russ, half buried in the mud, its treads twisted inward like shattered bones. A las-burned crack missile lay beside it, partially submerged in a red-black pool. I didn't want to think about what color that pool used to be.
We moved in tight formation, single file, heads low, rifles braced and pressed to shoulders. There were 6 of us. Sergeant Bors, Kraus on Vox, Langer, Brint and Falk. All steady, all born in the dirt of Krieg. And me, Guardsman Lecht, designated scribe for the squad. My duty, remember what the mission tried to forget, and what command refused to acknowledge. Bors raised his fist, motioned us down into a shell hole like a practiced silent ritual. We dropped wordlessly, boots squelching in soil that no longer smelled like soil. Just rot. More like sulfur, acid, something sour like blood left too long in the wrong air. He scanned the fog with his Auspex lens, breath slow inside his hissing respirator. Check surroundings. 2-minute halt. No signals. We obeyed without comment, just the click of safeties and the breath of machines. I knelt by the crater wall and rested my rifle on its edge in silence. The silence out here was brutal, not the silence of peace, something deeper. It was the silence of something listening, something waiting to be noticed or obeyed. Falco was the first to notice it.
Tracks, he said. Low, hoarse, more breath than voice. He pointed toward the slope on the far side of the crater, motion deliberate, not afraid. I moved beside him, squinting through the fog, scanning for movement, for shapes, for anything. He was right. A string of deep, fresh tracks led down into the hole. Heavy treads, standard issue. They looked Krieg, our pattern. But none of us came this way. And the kicker? No prints going back. Only one direction. Whoever came through never returned. Brint crouched by the trail, brushing his glove over the uppermost print with slow reverence. He froze. Surprised. Still warm, he said. Thoughtful. Ground soft beneath. No crust. Someone stepped here recently. Less than an hour ago. I felt something curl in my stomach. Not quite fear. Not yet. But not nothing. If someone had passed through, why hadn't they responded to any vox hails or calls? Sergeant Bors didn't speak. He turned and resumed marching, straight into the fog before us. We followed. No questions, no hesitation. That's how you live longer than your own memories. We crested the next ridge and found what used to be the trench entrance.
ruined. It looked like a gaping wound. Sandbags shredded, barbed wire melted, steel plates torn outward. Brint raised his rifle and stepped down first, sweeping the corner with tight, trained motions. Then Bors. Then the rest of us, weapons raised, but hearts already bracing for something worse. The air in the trench was colder, heavier. The fog didn't just float here, it pulsed, as if inhaling and exhaling in time with some buried beast beneath the ground. Pipes along the walls were rattling faintly, but there was no wind, no pressure shift. Just that heavy, damp silence, and the sound of boots on boards old and forgotten. I turned back briefly, instinct maybe, just a twitch in the skull, not in training. There were no footprints behind us, none. My chest tightened. I looked again. Still nothing. Our trail had vanished in less than 10 meters. The mud behind us was pristine. Annoyed. "Kraus," I said over the unit line. "You see anything strange?" Muttering. "Define strange," he muttered. "You mean the trench that's been dead for weeks but breathes like a dying man?" Thoughtful. I didn't answer. We pressed deeper. Signs of past occupation were everywhere. Sandbags, rusting laser guns stacked beside sentry points. Even an autocannon, partially dismantled. But no bodies, no blood, no shell craters, no burn marks. It was like they'd vanished mid-step. Falk stopped at a comms post. The line was still live. The indicator blinked weakly. He picked up the handset and listened, then shook his head. Dead line, but there's a hum. Not static, not a voice, just muttering hum. He replaced it like it might start screaming instead. Kraus swept his Vox for signals again. Disciplined, slow, precise. Nothing but silence on all channels. No response from command, no backup inbound, no sound but our own breathing. Then I felt it. The trench floor throbbed under my boots. A faint pulse, like a hidden heartbeat. Something impossibly large, buried deep, alive, pretending to sleep until we stepped too loud. Brint swore and grabbed my shoulder. "You feel that?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah." It passed, just once. Just enough to remind us we were standing on something that wasn't finished with us. We reached the command dugout. The hatch was open, not blown, not forced, just open. Inside, the table was set, rations untouched, a still burning lamp, a cup of recaf, half full, still warm. Kraus stepped back. Nervously, "I'm calling it now," he said. "This sector isn't abandoned, it's waiting." Sergeant Bors didn't respond. He stared into the dugout like he was remembering something unspoken, or trying to forget something the Emperor couldn't wash away. Gravelly voice. "Secure perimeter," he said at last. "Prep for overwatch. We'll hold position until 0600. "And then?" I asked. He turned slowly. His voice was lower than I'd ever heard it, like gravel choking. "Then we dig in." No man questioned him. That's the Krieg way. You don't question what breathes beneath the ground. You just follow the sound. We set up our watch. Falk on the left, Brint on the approach. I took rear guard, just in case something came from the trench we'd already crossed. As I watched the fog drift over the lip of the crater, I could almost hear it whispering. Not words, not voices, just breath. Heavy. Waiting. Waiting to inhale. We were 6 men, alone in a trench meant for 40, huddled in silence that felt louder than any artillery ever could. Sergeant Bors had taken first watch, posted at the northern lip, with his rifle resting quietly against the wire-stripped support beam. I sat near the dugout's edge, writing in my journal with a pencil ground so short it bit into my gloves with every stroke. Falk was cleaning mud off his bayonet with a rag from his bedroll, murmuring something beneath his breath I couldn't quite catch. Kraus fiddled with the Vox unit again, trying to pull a signal from the fog, as if hope came in frequencies instead of prayers. Brint and Langer shared a heat pack ration in silence, watching steam curl up and vanish like the memories we didn't speak about.
No one laughed. No one joked. Not here. Not anymore. Not after what we heard an hour ago when the trench exhaled. That was when the whisper came, soft and distant, like words spoken through cloth, drifting through the fog at my back. I turned quickly, rifle raised, scanning the trench behind us, where the fog pulsed slow and steady, like the breath of something buried.
Did anyone hear that cracking voice? I asked aloud, not over comms, voice cracking slightly from behind my rebreather. Nobody answered. That was answer enough. Another whisper came, closer. This one said my name. Lecht. Drawn out, slowly. Not a shout, not a scream, but a greeting. I felt my skin crawl beneath my uniform as I stood and swung my weapon left, then right, every corner looking suddenly unfamiliar and wrong. No one should have known my name. We hadn't removed helmets or spoken unfiltered words since we crossed the trench wall that morning. A voice that clear, that human, couldn't be made through a mask, not through a grill, not through a Death World respirator. It wasn't static either. No vox feedback, no echo. Just a perfectly spoken name, with no distortion and no breath behind it. Falk stepped out from his sentry post and met my eyes. He'd heard it too. That confirmed it. We weren't hallucinating. Yet. I heard your name, he muttered, lowly through comms, like it was whispered in my own ear. My mouth felt dry behind filters.
Bors ordered us to maintain positions, check weapons, and not move unless we had visual confirmation.
He hadn't heard it himself. Not yet. Then the whisper came again. This time, louder, not my name, but someone else's. Kraus. Followed by a moment of stillness, so unnatural, it hurt. Kraus's hand slipped off the Vox dial. His posture went rigid. I saw it even through the fog. He recognized that voice. One by one, it called our names. Not like a roll call, but like it was remembering us. Brint, Langer, Falk, Bors, Lecht. Each name sounded slightly different, spoken by a different mouth, all human, all unmasked, all too close, too familiar, too real. Our rebreathers made every word come out gravel thick and hollow. No one could speak like that out here, not with the masks on. Sergeant Bors was the first to break formation. He stepped forward into the fog and said firmly, "Identify yourself or be fired upon." But there was no response, not from a body, not from a voice, just fog curling tighter around the trench like coiled sinew. Falca raised his lasgun. That voice wasn't mechanical. That voice was bare. That voice breathed like it didn't care if it choked on ash. I scanned our rear. Nothing. Just a trench wall, a dying light, and the darkness behind it that seemed to pulse with sound. Then the whisper laughed, a soft, hoarse chuckle, like a dying man exhaling into cloth, dragging humor from a place no joy should live. I froze. That laugh didn't belong to anyone in our squad. I'd heard my comrades laugh during drills. This wasn't that. It wasn't sane. Rent raised his rifle toward the source. We stacked by the old Vox relay point. Nothing there, just empty air and old machine stink. That was when we saw it, a silhouette at the trench bend, just barely visible in the fog. A Krieg helmet, unmoving, watching. Bors motioned Falk forward. Falk advanced slowly, bayonet ready. He tapped the figure's shoulder and the coat collapsed. Empty, hollow, full of nothing. Just a uniform and a helmet with nothing inside, as if worn by fog that had grown tired of pretending to be a man. The tags on the coat were blank, not just scrubbed, manufactured with no name, no number, no birth rank, no record, no origin. "Someone's screwing with us," Brint whispered. "Or something's wearing our faces." We all turned slowly toward the sound that followed. Someone coughing, wetly. It wasn't through a mask, no rasp, no grill, just lungs straining raw, gasping through fog like it wanted to drown instead of breathe. Suddenly sound from above. Kraus said suddenly, "Trench lip." We raised our rifles and lights toward the ridge. Saw nothing but a ripple in vapor. No figures, no movement. Just a shadow that wasn't there anymore. And a laugh that hung in the air too long to be real. Then the whisper came one more time. Not behind us, not ahead, but inside our ears, bypassing comms. Too perfect, too clear, too knowing. "You've already taken them off," it said. The lantern shouldn't have been burning. It was Krieg issue. Blackened brass with a heat sink grate and broken glass over the light plate, scarred and old. We found it tucked into the corner of an abandoned dugout at the end of a collapsed trench arm. No blood, no spent shells, no footprints, just fog. And the lantern, still glowing. Falk stepped in first. His boots left shallow prints on the dirt floor, but the room itself looked untouched for weeks. A cot had rotted into itself. A data slate lay cracked in the corner. The field table was bowed with damp. But the lantern sat perfectly centered on top, still burning, its glow warm like firelight, not the cold green of our own. I reached down and hovered a gloved hand above the coil. It was still hot, not just warm, freshly lit. Less than an hour. Kraus scanned for heat signatures. Nothing. The dugout read as lifeless, but the lantern read as real. Uncomfortably real. Bors didn't speak. He just watched it like it might answer questions none of us were willing to ask out loud. Langer moved to the desk. There was something beneath the lantern. A journal. Krieg bound. Cloth wrapped. Stamped with an old sigil none of us immediately recognized or could assign to any regiment. He opened it. Pages inside were stained with damp, but one section was marked by a bent ration chit, still tucked inside the crease. He read silently for a long while, then looked up slowly, something off in his stance. Thoughtful. There's a name repeated, over and over, not a command, not a report, just a name. Almost like a prayer. Bors stepped forward. Curious. What name? Langer, though it sounded dry even through the rebreather. Whisper. The Pale Lieutenant. That landed like a shell without noise. The kind of silence that comes when everyone hears something they shouldn't understand, but do anyway. Reverent. The Pale Lieutenant. I stepped closer and read over Langer's shoulder. The handwriting was frantic in places, scratched deep into the page like the writer had gone through ink and kept going. The words weren't structured like official logs. They weren't date-stamped, no unit identifiers, just single lines, broken thoughts. Like someone trying to anchor themselves to paper before their memory failed. Some were complete sentences. Others were barely more than fragments. But they all referenced the same figure. Thoughtful. I saw him before I was deployed. Thought he was a dream, but he saluted. Gravelly. The Pale Lieutenant doesn't cast a shadow. He wears one. He doesn't need to shout. His voice finds you when you think you're alone. Chilling. I watched him walk through the fog. It opened for him, closed behind him. I was never found again. Solemn. He carries no weapon, but men kneel anyway. We passed the journal around. No one spoke until it landed with Brint. He didn't read it. He just stared at the cover for a while before finally speaking. Thoughtful. I've heard the name before. Not recently. Years ago. during trench baptism rites. Falk raised an eyebrow, curious. I thought Krieg didn't keep legends. Brint nodded, solemnly. We don't. We bury them. But some come back. Bors finally broke his silence, firmly. Put the journal in the satchel. Bring the lantern. If it's warm, it was left for us. That didn't feel like reassurance. It felt like an invitation. One we couldn't decline. Falk doused the flame. The glow vanished instantly. No smoke, no ember. Kraus scanned again. Still no heat signatures nearby. But the Vox unit on his back suddenly pulsed with faint static, rhythmic and unnatural. Signal fluctuation, he said. Can't lock the frequency. It's like something's trying to broadcast, but waiting. For what? I asked. He didn't answer. Outside, the fog had thickened again. It pressed against the trench walls like tide water. Slow, cold, constant. And then, as we stepped back into formation, I realized something else. The lantern had burned longer than regulation capacity. Krieg lamps were good for 8 hours on full charge. This one had burned well past that, and when Falk closed it, it gave no flicker, like it hadn't died, just ended, on command. We moved out with the journal. The name still echoed in my mind with every step. The pale lieutenant. We found them piled like discarded gear, curled in unnatural positions, bodies stiff with rigor, but each face locked in some silent scream. 6 corpses, Krieg pattern, uniforms intact, no blast wounds, no cauterized tissue, just blood. Pools of it, spilled across the floor like water, too much for 6 men to lose. Brint stepped into the bunker first, slipping slightly as his boot hit a dark smear of fluid. He steadied himself on the doorframe without a word, eyes already narrowed beneath his visor. I followed him in. The smell hit like a wall, copper, old rust, and something worse. Something that didn't belong in human biology. It was too sweet, sickly, thick, like syrup mixed with decay. My rebreather filtered most of it, but enough got through to sting the inside of my skull. Falk crouched by one of the bodies, a young guardsman, Krieg bred, no older than 20 by bone structure, still had dog tags on, etched and real. He rolled the body gently. The man's eyes were wide open, mouth locked mid-gasp. No wound, no puncture, just dried blood at the ears. Langer ran a handheld auspex over the corpse, slow sweep from temple to gut. The device crackled once, then went silent. No reading. Muttering. Internal hemorrhage, Langer muttered. No trauma to skin. It's like everything inside liquefied and forced its way out through the softest tissue. Thoughtful. Poison? I asked. Gas? Falk shook his head. Masks are intact. Seals are still green. They never breached. They never even took them off. We checked each corpse. Same story. No external wounds, no signs of struggle. Weapons still holstered at their sides. Some were even holding standard-issue pens or unwrapped rations in their dead fingers. No fight, no panic, just instant collapse. Brint stood over the largest blood pool. He crouched and dipped his fingers into it, held it up to the light. Thick, slow, still wet. He looked at us, something grim flickering in his expression. Gravely, this happened recently, less than an hour, no drying, no clotting, nothing natural. We all glanced at the corpses again. If they died recently, why were they already this stiff? Why weren't they warm? Sergeant Bors remained silent the entire time. He walked the room twice, never stepping in the blood, never touching the bodies. Finally, he stopped near the exit hatch, where a discarded journal lay half submerged in the muck. He picked it up, wiped it with his sleeve, opened it without hesitation. Another entry, same hand as before, same jagged strokes, same downward slant of desperation and rot. They bled from nothing. They died without breaking skin. Their blood feared the pale lieutenant more than death. Kraus went pale behind his lenses. "Nervous, sir," he said over comms. "We should report this. This isn't battlefield death. This is something else." Bors snapped the journal shut and turned to face us. "Gruff. No signals getting through in this trench. We finish sweep. We mark the bodies. Then we burn them." Sharply. "Burn," Falk said. "They're Krieg. We log them, record their tags, send them home." Flatly. "There's nothing to send home," Bors replied. "No man dies clean and leaves no trace inside." No one argued. We gathered their dog tags, stacked their corpses with care, poured promethium from our emergency canister and set them alight. The fire didn't catch quickly. The blood resisted, sizzled strangely, as if boiling off something deeper than flesh. When the flames did rise, they burned a color I'd never seen before in any campaign. Pale orange, then white, then gray. Like smoke from a memory you were trying to forget. As we watched them burn, Kraus whispered something I wasn't meant to hear. Krieg corpses don't bleed. And yet, here we were, standing in a trench that defied biology, surrounded by fog that could whisper in names, carrying a journal that knew too much, and following the path of a lieutenant who might never have existed. We found the picked feed unit buried beneath a collapsed Vox panel, charred at the edges, half submerged in ash, but still blinking red. Kraus pried it loose from the metal brace and set it on the ammo crate beside the dugout hatch. The screen flickered twice. No signal, no header, just a timestamp blinking in the corner, alone and out of place. At first we didn't register it. Our minds were too wrapped in the last fire, too smothered in the smell of Krieg blood. But Langer leaned in closer. His gloved finger tapped the timestamp, slowly, deliberately, thoughtful. "Look at the date," he said. "That's not today." Falk adjusted the brightness. The glow sharpened. The timestamp was clear now. It read 07-29-241-M42. That was tomorrow. We didn't speak. Kraus looked at Bors. Bors didn't flinch. Resolute. "Play it," he said. Kraus tapped the sequence. The screen crackled, then cleared. A trench. Ruined. Familiar. Our trench. Same location. Same dugout. Same blood pattern on the wall. Same scorch marks near the stove. Then the figure came into frame. Krieg greatcoat. Commissarial badge. Hat missing. Mask torn. Eyes wide. He was shaking. Mouth agape. Lars pistol in his left hand. A bloodied Aquila in the right. Clutched like a relic. The footage was grainy, but the voice came through clean. He was screaming. Not in fear. In clarity. Like a man seeing something he'd always known, but never accepted. "I see them now," he said. "I see their faces in the wire. I see them watching us from the sky." He stepped back, hit the wall, slid down into a crouch. Eyes locked on something above the feed's range. "They're not dead. None of them died. They just moved sideways, that's all. They moved sideways." The camera shook slightly as he began to weep. Then, just as fast, he pressed the Lars pistol under his chin and pulled the trigger. The blast flared white on the screen. The feed cut to black. Kraus stepped back. "No ID on that, commissar," he said. Bors walked to the screen and stared at the frozen frame. Just before the shot, the moment of recognition. "That's Commissar Vortan," he said. Falk stiffened, annoyed. "Sir, Vortan was declared KIA 2 weeks ago. Same report as General Struss." "I know," Bors replied.
I watched his execution. He died clean, bolt round, public. He looked back at the picked feed, thoughtful. This wasn't that. Brint stepped forward, surprised. What did he mean? Sideways? No one answered, because we all knew. The fog didn't just cloud vision. It clouded time. It blurred the line between tomorrow and today, between memory and moment. The Vox on Krause's back crackled once, then went dead. Screamed. A shriek, barely human, tore through the channel for 3 full seconds before cutting out. We didn't try to trace the source. Outside, the fog throbbed again. Not like wind, not like heat, like breath, or footsteps, impossibly large, circling just beyond sight. Langer stepped away from the picked feed and picked up the commissar's aquila from the corner of the crate. It was still warm. It began with footsteps that didn't belong to anyone still alive. We were moving along the east trench spur past the collapsed comms alcove, where the air smelled like scorched leather and old code. Boars led point. I was third in line. Volk kept rear. The fog thinned just enough to reveal 3 meters of ground ahead. That was when we heard it. Boots striking metal and packed earth, regular, measured, crisp. But not ours. Too fast, too many. They overlapped our own, mismatched sync, then stopped the moment we did, like a recording catching up to reality and cutting out just before it became obvious. Krause turned slowly. Did anyone else? Footsteps. 6 o'clock. Multiple, Volk confirmed. No visual, Brint added. No pressure vibration. It's like the trench itself played it back. We stood still, short pause, listened, then took 1 step forward, carefully. Nothing. Another step, then faintly just behind us again, the same sound, our past, played back. Boots on mud, click of a lasgun charge. Even someone clearing their throat, though none of us had coughed in hours. The trench echoed us, but it did so late. It wasn't ambient reverb. It wasn't acoustics. It was recorded memory, as if the earth had learned our movements and was now remembering them in reverse. Folk backed toward the trench wall. This isn't psychic, he muttered. It's mnemonic. The dirt is playing us like a hymn. That word stuck with me. Hymn. Because that was when we heard the Vox. It wasn't from Krause's unit. It came from below, from a body half buried in the mud near the bend. A Krieg trooper, slumped over the wall, uniform soaked in old blood. Langer pointed. His helmet Vox was still active, dim red glow, flickering. And then it sparked once and played. Not static, not orders, but a hymn. Krieg Litany 49, the Emperor, is the grave that holds the sky. We all froze. I knew it. We all did. We had memorized it during training. It was only ever played once, during interment. This was the version recorded for full company funerals. No percussion, no timing. It stretched, like breath, between grave markers. But this trooper's Vox unit didn't have a playback function. Only receive, only transmit, not store. Yet it played. Folk reached down and rolled the body over. Dog tags were missing. So was the face. Not wounded, just not there, as if erased. Smoothed out like clay. Even the helmet grill was warped, bent in,
like something had breathed into it instead of through it. The hymn stopped. Then the unit flared again. White light. One word, digitized and decayed, but unmistakable. Remember. Kraus dropped to one knee, scanning frequencies. Nothing inbound, nothing near. It's not broadcasting from a known source. It doesn't need to, Falk said. The trench remembers for it. Bors ordered us to log the body and leave it intact. Dead doesn't mean safe, he muttered. Not here. As we moved past the corpse, I glanced back once, just for a second. It saluted. I swear on every oath and every bone beneath Krieg, the damn thing saluted.
The forward listening post was supposed to be a shell crater with 2 Vox stakes, a perimeter grate and no more than a cot. Though when we reached it, just past grid marker Theta 49, it looked nothing like a standard Krieg entrenchment post. No comms relay, no dust trails, no signs of sentries anywhere nearby. Just silence. And shapes. Hundreds of shapes. Some pale, some metal. All wrong. We didn't speak at first. Even Bors froze at the lip of the crater. Because something had built this, not scattered it, arranged it, by hand, or what was left of one. The skulls came first, human, mostly Krieg, some fresh, others darkened with ash and flaked bone where the wind had kissed them. They weren't dumped, they weren't piled, they were placed, each one nested carefully into a groove in the crater wall, eye sockets all facing outward, like spotters watching no man's land for movement that could never come again. And they weren't alone. Each skull had been fused, mechanically, surgically, to something that didn't belong. Servo fragments, Vox teeth, Auspex cables run like ligatures through shattered jawbones, like crude, reverent sutures. One had a cogitator key punched straight through the temple, like a makeshift halo still humming with failed power. Falk stepped down first, weapon raised, boots grinding bone into soot with every cautious meter forward. I followed, keeping left. Bors gave no orders. He didn't need to. This wasn't a battlefield anymore. It was a cathedral. A war-born shrine sculpted from death, machine and ritual intent. In the center of the post, where a Vox terminal should have been, stood a single servitor frame, rusted at the joints, unmoving. It had no legs, just steel rods driven deep into the mud, like a punishment stake. Its arms were crossed over its chest, but the fingers were wrong, skeletal, mismatched, carved with micro-etchings like prayers too small to read. On its chest plate, a Krieg rank badge had been riveted upside down. Comms Trooper Second Class Valis. The last name was unreadable, melted, worn flat, or erased entirely. Langer stepped toward the frame, Auspex in hand, voice tight. No power source, he said. No heat, no signal. But just as he said it, the thing moved, only slightly, only enough. Its jaw dropped, 1 centimeter, a dry hinge click. And then, nothing. Kraus scanned the ridge again. Still no movement, but there's a frequency spike, low band, not ours, not even Imperial. Brint circled behind the frame, shining a dim torch against the far wall of the crater. Then he stopped cold, because there, carved in a circle of blood-dark filth, were 7 words. The pale lieutenant does not kneel. We stood in silence. Something shifted in the air. Not a breeze, not a wind, but temperature, intent, like the soil was remembering our trespass and choosing not to strike just yet. Falk turned slowly, gesturing to another corner of the post. There, we saw the final arrangement. 3 Krieg skulls stacked in a pyramid. On top, Balanced like an offering lay a Voxcaster earpiece, the old kind, analog, predating digital signal. And from it, barely audible, came a looped, static-drenched phrase. 4 words. He never forgets names. Bors took a step back. For the first time, I saw his hand tighten slightly on the grip of his lasgun. He looked to us, then to the sky, though there was no sky now, only fog, only ash, only that impossible silence that follows a sacred defilement. "Catalogue the remains," he said. "Don't touch the frame, and no one, I repeat, no one, touch that Vox." No one argued, because no one wanted to know what might answer. The artillery platform was supposed to be the anchor of this sector, a Krieg-pattern siege battery with overlapping firing arcs and 6 assigned crew. But when we reached the position, there was no movement, no heat signatures, no chatter, no spent shells, no visible impact marks. Just dust and blood, and one man left behind, if he could still be called that. Bors signaled for a standard sweep. We split formation. Langer and Brint checked the left pillbox. Falke and I circled toward the main gun deck. That's where we saw it. The breech loader was open, fused wide by an intentional overheat spike. The firing mechanism had been disabled manually, with a rusted shovel jammed into the primary axle like a lock, and nailed to the rear breech. Shoulders slumped, feet dragging, uniform burned black, was the gunner. His arms were spread, nails, long hand-forged, not regulation, driven through each palm. The blood wasn't fresh, but it hadn't dried naturally either. It had congealed in long vertical trails, like it had been pulled downward too slowly to truly fall. Even in death, the man looked like he was resisting something below, something pulling, something not done yet. Falk turned to me. "There are no bodies," he whispered. I nodded. No crew, no fallback trails, no blood but his. Kraus climbed onto the deck, scanning for any record slates among the wreckage. None found, but the gunner had left something behind. His helmet, placed at his feet, had something carved into the inner lining. Not scratched, etched. Each stroke deep, precise, intentional. Falk read it aloud, slowly. "Keep them below." We stood in silence again, a silence that felt more like reverence than fear or command. This wasn't madness. This was a choice, a warning. Langer came over with a recovered log sliver, a fragment of a burnt slate, still readable through one quadrant. It listed the final artillery firing sequence. Coordinates, unknown. Order, origin, unverified. Target designation, the door. Kraus scanned for that phrase in the archive. No match, not in Krieg logs, not in Munitorum designation, not even in restricted commissariat channels. Just nothing. Then we checked the shells. Each one was marked, not with a serial code, but a single phrase in thick black paint. Sink them. Not destroy, not eliminate. Sink. As if something below the soil line was alive enough to rise, unless it was nailed down, burned, or buried beneath artillery fire. Falk stepped toward the gunner's corpse again. He raised his light to inspect the man's eyes, but stopped. His pupils. We leaned closer. There were tiny etched symbols carved into the iris tissue, barely visible, like catechisms or litanies scored onto living glass. Langer scanned it. The auspex couldn't even register biological matter. The body no longer read as human. Brint looked toward the fog. "It wasn't the enemy he was firing at," he said. "It was something else, something we've never been told about." Bors gave a quiet nod.
Because Krieg doesn't report what it fears, he said. It buries it. And this place, this platform, hadn't been abandoned. It had been sacrificed. One man left behind, not to die, but to hold the door shut.
We were moving along the outer trench split, a thin, sloped path that looped behind the ruins of a communications relay bunker. Standard patrol rotation, formation held. No contact, no noise, no fog anomalies. We were tired, not careless. 5 meters visibility, no new tracks, no recent shell fall, nothing to cause what happened next. Trooper Mern was just ahead of me, third in line, las pistol holstered, shovel clipped, no sign of erratic behavior. He had passed through inspection, no mental strain, no warp exposure. He was breathing clean. He was Krieg. One step, he was there. Next step, gone. No sound, no scream, no trace, just absence. Like he had never been walking between us at all. One heartbeat, he was there. The next, the trench felt wider by exactly one soul. We froze, everyone. Weapons up, eyes forward. Kraus dropped instantly to scan movement signatures. Nothing. Falk activated Auspex sweep. Negative. Langer, shouted his name into the fog. No echo, no return. Bors raised a fist sternly. "Hold formation, do not move," he ordered. Even his voice wavered. Just a fraction. We double counted 5 now. We searched the trench walls. Nothing disturbed. No collapse. No sinkhole. No dust cloud. No blood. Not even a boot print where he should have landed or fallen. Brint found the shovel. 10 meters back, not forward. Still warm. Handle intact. Blade bent completely in half, like it had been snapped against something with slow, relentless force. Not torn, not hit. Bent. Folk picked it up. The curve was perfect. Uniform pressure, no jagged warping. It looked like something had wrapped around it like a mouth. We radioed back to platoon command, no response. Not static. Silence. No ping. No signal trace. As if Mern had taken a piece of the comms grid with him when he vanished. Then Kraus looked down. He dropped a motion sensor near where Mern had disappeared. A standard seismic relay for troop movements. It showed a pulse. Just one. Downward. Straight through the trench wall. "I'm getting vertical displacement," he said. "Depth irregular. Too sharp to be a collapse. More like something pulled weight straight into the soil." "You mean he sank?" I asked. "No, not sank," Kraus replied. "Dragged." Bors issued the order. Sweep perimeter. No more than 2 meters spacing. No digging. No recovery. No prayer. Just forward movement. Because in Krieg, you do not mourn the lost. You move past them. You learn from them. But as we moved, I looked back once. Just once. And the dirt rippled. Not like water, not like heat distortion. Like something underneath had turned over. Just slightly. Like a sleeper readjusting its weight. I looked at the shovel again. Still bent. Still warm. And I remembered something Bors once said back in the early days. Krieg soil eats the dead. But when it's truly starving, it learns to eat the living too. We had just finished sweeping the trench near Theta 5. Brint was patching a breach in the outer wall with bonecrete. Kraus was recharging the Auspex rig. Langer was cataloguing the bent shovel for requisition report. Bors was silent. None of us spoke of Mern. Krieg trains you to survive loss, not to name it.
but something had shifted in the soil since he vanished. It didn't feel empty anymore. It felt watched. Then, the order came. Standard courier drop. No vox ping, no transmission. Just a black-plated servo skull drifting out of the mist, its vox beacon silent, its eyes dull. Strapped to its lower jaw was a message capsule, stamped, sealed, authenticated with a general's signet. Falk removed the capsule and cracked the wax. Inside, one order sheet. No header data, no authentication sigils beyond the wax, just one line of typed instruction. Investigate subsector dugouts, 42A through 42C. Descend immediately. Do not delay. This is final.
At the bottom of the page, in crimson ink, was the signature of General Traven of Krieg High Command.
Brint stepped back. That's impossible. Falk turned. Traven's dead. Exactly, Brint replied. He died during the siege of Baltivar 3 months ago. We watched the flames reach his command bastion. Publicly recorded, Langer added. Tombed with honor, vox logged. He's gone. Yet the seal was real. The order was real, and Bors didn't question it. Orders are orders, he said, but even his voice was thin, not hesitant, but stretch. Kraus folded the message and slotted it into his satchel. Falk scanned the local trench grid. Dugouts 42A to 42C are located under the flooded munitions channel, near the hollow ridge. I remembered that place. We all did. No one was posted there anymore. Not since the wall collapse swallowed 6 engineers and a tech priest whole without warning. We were told it was unstable. We were told it was condemned, and now we were ordered to go in.
Descending into a structure buried beneath Krieg's skin, with a signature from a corpse as our only clearance. We reached the entry hatch by nightfall, if there was still such a thing as night. Fog hadn't cleared in 4 cycles. The sun was just a rumor behind the clouds now. The hatch was sealed, manually. Not locked, sealed. As in welded shut from the outside using a fusion torch. Someone had made damn sure that no one went in again. Falk looked to Bors, serious. Sir, this wasn't just abandoned. This was closed, by force, by intent. Calm. I can see that, Bors said. He gestured to Langer, commanding, cut the welds. There was no protest, because protest doesn't exist on Krieg, only obedience, even when the order comes from a hand long since rotted away. Langer lit the torch, the seal cracked, and as the hatch opened, a windless breath spilled from below, air thick with rust, copper, and something else. Like wet pages, like memories stored in damp catacombs. And as it hit my rebreather, my vox cracked once. A whisper, one word. Descent. We descended one by one. Down rust-laced rungs, past decades of carbon scoring and soot rot, into a trench tunnel that hadn't seen light in years. Our boots hit dust, not mud. It was too old for moisture. It had turned to ash, packed fine against the walls like powdered bone and cremated grit. The air was wrong. Not just stale, not just dead. It tasted like ink, like old ink. Faded orders and forgotten reports ground into the stone until even breath carried command structure in its exhale. The hatch sealed behind us, manually, by Bors's hand. Long pause. No one spoke of whether it would open again. Kraus activated his low-band vox. No signal. Falker's auspex read negative for life. But the temperature kept rising, only slightly. Only enough to notice that the chill of surface war was no longer with us. Down here it felt like a grave that hadn't cooled, a tomb that still remembered its last burial. We passed a support beam marked with Krieg construct stamped 192A, still legible despite age and corrosion, standard format. Dugout 42A. Excavated by Penal Engineer Unit 774. Confirmed, sealed 5 years ago. Declared spiritually contaminated by order of execution. Commissar Graven, 5th Siege Church. Graven had also been dead for 3 years. The further we walked, the more the tunnel changed. What began as utility-grade steel reinforcement gave way to something older, more sacred. The walls became etched, not by machine, not by builders, by hands, thousands of hands. Each surface was scored with names, endless, overlapping, desperate names in every trench-bred dialect. Trooper designations, family units, even serial numbers with slashes carved through them, like someone was trying to erase identity mid-memory. One name repeated 5 times in a row, etched by different hands. I am still down here. Falk slowed his pace. His helmet lamp swept over the wall. There's no spacing, he muttered. No structure, no logic to the layers. Brint crouched beside a patch of overlapping etchings, thoughtful. The tools used weren't regulation. Some of these cuts were made with shovels. One's a broken las bayonet. They weren't carving to be read, I said. They were carving to be remembered. Kraus scanned the tunnel again. Still nothing alive, still no seismic shift. Surprised. But something's running heat in Sector B. There's bleed in the floor. We turned a corner and found it. A broken cogitator station, long since fused, was still warm to the touch beneath scorched plating. Its data slate tray had melted into the wall, but a single cable remained, plugged into the dirt. Not machinery, the soil. Falk reached down to touch it. The cable twitched, slightly, but we saw it, like a vein reacting to light. He recoiled fast. No power source, no grid, no generator, he whispered. Thoughtful. Then how is it running? Brint asked. It's not, I said. It's remembering. Then the whisper started. It didn't come through Vox. It came through the walls. A slow murmur, like a congregation beneath concrete. No single voice. Just 100 at once. Male, female, child. We dug too deep. We are the line now. If we stop digging, they climb. They climb. Bors raised his weapon. This is Warp Echo. Don't respond. Don't listen. But it was too late, because one of the voices used my name. Not rank, not designation. My name. The one I had buried in the conscription chamber back on Krieg. The one I hadn't heard in years. And it whispered, soft as guilt, "You're already buried. You're just the last to know." We reached what should have been a waterlock station. Dugout 42B, built to manage runoff during siege rainfalls and internal trench flooding. The door was open, not breached, not destroyed. Just waiting, half ajar, smeared with something dark, not rust, not rot. Blood. Falk swept his torch along the corridor, walls thick with moisture, not condensation, not steam, soaked beyond natural saturation. The kind of saturation you only see after a week of constant bleeding through every surface. Thick lines trailing downward from support beams, dripping from rivets, tooling in old boot prints that didn't match any pattern we wore or recognized. Brint checked the Vox. Nothing. Kraus ran thermal, no heat, but the walls pulsed, only faintly, but enough. Enough to feel it. The mud here wasn't just wet, it had weight, memory, the kind that presses back against your boots like it's trying to hold on, or worse, trying to climb up. We moved carefully down the central path,
Torchlight danced across the steel-braced walls, revealing shapes half swallowed by grime and half forgotten in rot. Fingers, bones, a helmet strap that tightened as we passed, like it was remembering being worn by someone who never left. Then Langer found the slate, half melted, propped on a munitions crate that had somehow not rusted through despite the suffocating moisture of the corridor, wrapped in waterproof casing that had torn at the edges but still held fast around the relic. Inside, a single page, written in coal pencil, blood-smeared but legible, handwritten, familiar Krieg glyphs. Falk read it aloud. Solemn. We are not all dead. Thoughtful. Not all awake. Some stayed behind. Not by duty, but by choice. We left ourselves here. The last line had been scrawled over and over, violently. Shouting, we left ourselves here. Brint leaned against the wall to steady himself. He looked at his glove. Red. Not fresh, but warm. Sir, he said, this isn't runoff. The walls are sweating blood. We ran a test. Standard Auspex vial. Protein match, human. But not matching any known profile. Not Krieg, not local, not even Imperial. That's not possible, Langer said. It is now, Falk muttered. Then the hymns started again. No vox, no signal, just vibration, through our boots, through the walls, like the bones of Krieg itself were humming in regret. We left ourselves here. The lights flickered, not ours, the station lights, on, for the first time in decades, each one flaring to life in slow sequence down the corridor ahead. But we hadn't touched the switch. Someone, or something, wanted us to see what was next. Kraus raised his rifle. Falk chambered around. No one needed to speak, because down here, silence was already screaming. And the mud beneath our feet moved. We followed the lights, down the corridor, one flickering lumen after another, crackling to life as if dragged from memory, not electricity. The walls no longer bled, they glistened, polished by unseen hands, carved smooth like a cathedral chamber. This wasn't a dugout anymore. It was a sanctum. That's when we heard it, a Vox unit, faint, catching on static, rewinding, replaying, singing. It wasn't a distress call, not orders, not code. It was music, not the kind sanctioned by the Munitorum. No drums, no call to arms, no imperial fanfare. It was a funeral chant, Krieg pattern, old dialect, one we hadn't heard since first burial training back in the silence of the chapel trench. Low tone, melancholic, a melody meant to be sung by dozens of troopers at once, shoulder to shoulder, grave to grave. But this wasn't dozens. Falk approached first, crouched near the signal. His torch caught the rusted shell of a Vox emitter mounted inside the wall like a forgotten relic, cracked, flaked. A relic, not a device. It had no power source, no attached cable, yet it played. The chant looped in steady rhythm, each voice perfectly spaced in choral sync and cadence. A harmony of loss, of duty, of acceptance. But something was wrong. Kraus adjusted the Auspex scanner. Playback integrity too clean, he whispered. No overlapping frequencies, no phase error, no volume drift. Bors turned to him. Meaning what? Meaning it wasn't a choir, Kraus said. It's one voice, just one trooper, layered over itself, dozens of times, as if he recorded every part of the chorus alone. We stared at the vox. The chant repeated. We kneel to bury, we stand to be buried, we march for those too broken to crawl. Falkir reached for the casing and stopped. There, etched into the vox frame, barely visible beneath the rust, was a phrase. I will not be forgotten, so I became everyone.
Langer swallowed hard.
That's not grief, he said. That's identity collapse. No, I whispered. That's Krieg. We build graves for strangers. We name our dead by serial, not by soul. We cremate files before we burn flesh. But whoever this was, he sang for every one of us, every ghost, every loss, alone, in the dark, until the walls learned the tune and sang it back without him. The vox stuttered, looped again, and on the final verse, the voice cracked. It cried. Just once, just a break, barely audible, but it was there. The sound of a soldier remembering he was human, too late. And in the silence that followed, the vox sparked one last time, then died. The lights around us dimmed, and in that brief, sacred dark, we heard it from down the tunnel. The same chant, still playing, but now without the vox.
Dugout 42C fed directly into the old cistern trench, a decommissioned filtration system meant to recycle groundwater for Krieg's lower sectors. The air was thicker here, almost gelatinous. Every breath came slower, not from lack of oxygen, but from the weight of something that shouldn't have been breathing at all. No light. Even our torches seemed dimmer, not weaker, resisted, like the darkness had mass, and it pushed back. We reached the edge of the pool. It was no longer water. The liquid had turned opaque, like engine coolant mixed with ash and coagulated runoff. And the stench, embalming fluid, melted ration plastic, burnt hair and iron, too much iron. Falk swept his torch over the surface. Slow, cautious. At first it looked like sludge, rippling, static. Then the ripples stilled, and we saw the first face, then another, then dozens, half-submerged bodies, all in Krieg uniforms, still wearing rebreathers, still marked with standard rank tabs and regiment tags. But the visors were broken. The faces beneath were exposed, not melted, not skinned, inverted. Skin pulled inward like every facial feature had collapsed into itself, sucked back into the skull. Eyes sunken until they faced the bone. Lips folded inward in grotesque spirals like warped cloth. Noses turned flat and twisted like wire sculptures, unnatural. And yet, they were smiling, every single one, a perfect frozen grin. Lips peeled back so far they split at the corners, teeth gleaming like altar relics beneath the surface slime, holy yet defiled. Langer moved closer, too close. One of the bodies twitched, not violently, not suddenly, just enough. A ripple, a shift of the jaw, as if it was still forming its expression, still trying to perfect its joy. Falk yanked him back. We raised weapons, but none of us fired, because they weren't attacking, they weren't rising, they were watching. Kraus ran a scan. No life signs, no residual heat, no electrical response, he said, then paused. But they're floating in perfect formation. That's not natural. That's arrangement. On the far side of the pool, an old filtration console still blinked, flickering in half-life. Its data screen displayed one repeating command: recycle the remembered. Falk checked the last maintenance log. Last accessed 18 years ago. Last operator, Trooper Vask, Krieg 19th Siege. Autopsy filed, confirmed KIA, burial confirmed. And yet, here he was, smiling, twisted inward, floating like a blessing on poisoned water. Brint whispered without realizing it. They're happy to be forgotten. No, Bors said, voice low. They're not forgotten. They've been curated. And then one of them opened its mouth. Not fast, not loud, just wide, and inside its throat, scrawled in black ink and warp-burned teeth, were words that weren't spoken, but shown. This is what remains when purpose is pure. Kraus began backing up, his auspex spiked. The bodies weren't moving, but the pool was. It wasn't water, it wasn't coolant, it was memory, liquidized, concentrated. And we had stayed too long. Out, Bors ordered. No argument, no hesitation, not this time. We moved, and as we left, the smiles widened.
We exited the cistern tunnels into an access crawl, narrower, older, cut by hand. The walls bore marks, dug with shovels, not machines. Some tools still left embedded, rusted in place where they struck blood scenes, not iron veins, not mineral decay. Blood, real, still wet. No one spoke for 20 meters, not a word. Then we saw him, standing at the intersection, no weapon, no gear, standard Krieg uniform, flawless condition, no dirt, no wear, boots polished like he'd just stepped out of a parade line. But something was wrong. His badge tab was blank, his rank epaulet, unmarked, no name, no serial. Just a perfectly pressed coat on a soldier who didn't exist. He stood still, facing us, not blocking, not inviting, just present. Like a memory someone refused to forget, but also refused to speak of. Falk raised his rifle, aiming, not threatening. No reaction. Brint pinged his auspex. No reading, no temperature, no biosigns, no electromagnetic trace. Nothing.
Falker activated low-range Vox. Annoyed. Identify, name, rank, unit.
No response. The figure just tilted his head. Not fast, not erratic, like a curious dog. Or a man hearing a joke he'd forgotten how to laugh at. Then he spoke. Not through Vox, not aloud. The words simply arrived. In our minds. Raw, quiet, wrong. I led once. I was followed by those who forgot why they were marching. They buried me standing. And so I wait. We raised weapons, not to fire, just to remind ourselves that we still could. Falk stepped forward, annoyed. I said, identify, flatly. You can't touch what was never recorded. This time, aloud. His voice didn't echo. It was as flat as ash. Bors stepped past Falk. No command, just will. He approached, close enough to touch. He reached out. His hand passed through, like smoke, like breath. No resistance, no mass. The figure blurred briefly, then reformed. Exactly as he was. Exactly where he stood. No reaction.
Brint whispered.
Is it warp bleed? No, Kraus replied, scanning. There's no signature, no disturbance. Even warp ghosts have echoes. This is memory without a host. The figure tilted his head the other way, then spoke again, like a priest giving last rites no one asked for. You seek orders, but orders are graves. Every command is a shovel. Every map is a tomb. Falk hissed into Vox. Urgent. Sir, request permission to disengage. This isn't a target, it's a trap. But Bors didn't answer. He just stared, and slowly reached for his own name tag. clipped to his chest plate, then stopped. The figure stepped closer, still untouchable, still unreadable, still speaking, like memory personified. You think you wear identity, but identity wears you, and it peels away beneath the soil. Kraus backed off, urgent. We need to go, now. No one argued. We moved past him. He didn't stop us, just turned, silently. And as we passed, he spoke one last time, eerie. I was never real, but you will remember me, because you are walking toward the moment you stop being yourselves. We turned the next corner. He was gone. Not vanished, just forgotten, like he'd never been. Except for the whisper on my Vox minutes later, my name, spoken in my voice, coming from a source that didn't exist.
We moved in silence. More accurately, we moved in outside silence. Inside it was deafening. The tunnels narrowed again, so narrow that our formation broke, single file, no one more than 2 feet apart, and yet I felt alone. The voices started just after we passed the rusted door marked Staging Chamber B null. It had collapsed long ago, blocked by rubble. No visible entry, and yet, as we passed, I heard my name, not spoken aloud, not through Vox, inside. At first, I thought it was my thoughts, resurfacing, guilt, fatigue, echoes of training chamber mantras. But then, the voice answered me. We are not supposed to think, I told myself. Then a second version of my voice, not in tone, but in intent, whispered back. That's why they left you down here. I stumbled. Bors noticed. Steady. I'm fine, I lied. Falk turned briefly. I heard something. What kind of something? Brint asked.
Falker didn't answer, because he didn't need to. We were all hearing it. Voices, ours, but twisted, split. Like a cracked mirror had captured our minds and was now reflecting only the fractures. Kraus reached for his helmet, stopped halfway, then froze. Who just said pull the pin? We all looked at him. No one had spoken. His hand stayed on the frag grenade at his belt for a moment too long. Then he cursed. Inside. It came from inside. Brint nodded slowly. So it's not just me. My own thoughts were arguing, overlapping. One voice calm, reasonable, obedient. The other, hungry, not for food, not for blood, for clarity. You're not you, it whispered. You're a collection of copied orders and inherited shame. You didn't join the guard, you were recycled into it. I pressed my fist against my helmet, tried to pray, that even the litany of purpose sounded wrong in my head. You were born dead. Krieg only taught you to lie about it. Falk stopped walking. I can't tell which thoughts are mine anymore, he said. Brint stepped closer. Think of something random, something pointless, something the warp wouldn't guess. Falk closed his eyes. A pause. Then he said, red beet soup. A beat. Then Kraus said, red beet soup. Falk opened his eyes. He hadn't said it aloud. Kraus had answered a thought, not a voice, a thought. Bors snapped his fingers. Cut internal Vox. We all did. Didn't help. Because this wasn't Vox. This was something deeper. The mind peeled, the layers exposed, and something old and curious was reading every page. One voice, mine, told me to hold position. The other, also mine, whispered, shoot Bors in the spine. He's not real anymore. I nearly did, but I blinked hard, and Bors looked at me, as if he knew.
He gave a nod, small, subtle, and I realized he'd heard it too. Every single one of us was thinking in plural. By hour 3 of our descent, we began to suspect the map was lying, or maybe the map was never meant to tell the truth. We had followed grid coordinates perfectly. One direction, one corridor. No turns, no junctions, no mistakes. Yet somehow, we passed the same corner marker 4 times. Falk was first to notice. The first time, it was a rusted plaque, barely legible, stamped with a trench segment code, 44B. We logged it, scanned it, marked it with a red data flare. 40 meters forward, we passed it again. Same plaque, same rust pattern, same flare, still burning. Kraus checked the auspex. Thoughtful. Readings are clean. No loop, no echo. Nothing's shifted. Brint walked back 20 meters, didn't return for 1 minute, then reappeared from the other side. Annoyed. I circled nothing, he said. I walked straight and came back wrong. Falcon knelt and sprayed a white stripe across the floor. Bors cut an X into the wall with his trench knife. We advanced. 2 minutes later, we walked past the white stripe and the X again. But now the stripe was dripping, not paint, blood. Still warm. Brint backed away. I didn't bring that! Kraus activated a flare drone, launched it down the corridor. We watched the feed. 15 seconds of static tunnel. Then it passed the corner, then again and again. And on the 4th pass, the drone feed cut. Static. Then a voice, faint, same as before, but it wasn't ours. Keep moving. You almost stopped remembering. And then we'd have to start over. Falker snapped, agitated. We're not alone. Something's rerouting us. Psychospatial redirection. Like warp mazes. Like Zinch cult vaults. Calmly. No, said Bors, thoughtful. This isn't warp. This is Krieg. It was always like this. We just never went deep enough to notice. We stopped, laid a beacon, Vox beacon, passive only, waited. Nothing. We turned to go back, just in case. 3 steps later, we passed the same marker again. But this time, the flare on the wall had changed. The words had rearranged. The data flare now displayed, keep going. Falk scanned it. It was the same device, not swapped, not tricked. Same heat residue, same serial code, but a new message. Langer knelt beside it. Holographic programming doesn't do that without an input. He didn't get to finish, because the flare answered him. We input, you repeat. That's how memory becomes purpose. Kraus fell back. That's not tech. That's cognition. Something is mimicking our thought imprint, rewriting our own markers based on expectation. No, I whispered. It's not writing to our minds. It's writing to our hope. It wants us to think we're learning, so we keep walking. Bors raised his las rifle, determined. We keep walking anyway, because the only way out of memory is forward. No one argued, because the next marker said, if you stop now, you'll find yourselves again, and you won't like what you remember. We moved on. We broke the seal on Bunker 717A after finding it buried beneath collapsed earth and crushed ration crates, half sunk in memory. The door was shut, not jammed, not walked, sealed, intentionally. Someone had bolted it closed from the inside, 3 times. Each bolt inscribed with the same phrase, peace is disobedience. We breached it anyway. Inside, no rot, no blood, no wounds, no sign of toxin impact or starvation. Just 18 Krieg troopers, slumped, stacked, sitting against the bunker walls, some on crates, some beside support beams, all dead, but not like we were taught to die. They were holding each other. That's the part that froze us. Not the stillness, not the lack of wounds, not even the smiles, It was the touch. Arms draped over shoulders, helmets resting on one another's chests. One pair sat cross-legged, hands entwined like children hiding from a storm. One leaned back into the arms of another, cradled like a prayer returned. Folk scanned their tags. All Krieg, all 144th. Same regiment as us. Kraus blinked at his auspex. No decay, no metabolic activity, but no rigor mortis either. Brint moved to the far end of the bunker, found a chalkboard, faded but legible. Scrawled across the surface, "They forgave me, so I forgave us." A date was etched beneath it. 1 week ago. Langer checked the official record slate. This bunker was sealed 18 years ago, and yet the bodies were fresh. One trooper was still gripping a canteen. Another held a prayer scroll, burned black at the ends, as if it had been recited to completion, then incinerated mid-amen. Bors scanned the room slowly. None of them were armed. None of them were supposed to hold each other either, Volk whispers, because that was forbidden. Krieg doctrine allowed no contact, no comfort, no cradling the dying. Only final words and final silence. And here, in this bunker, we found 18 traitors to discipline, who looked happier than we'd ever been. Kraus activated his Vox recorder. The signal was dead. Static, then not static. The Vox lit up, not from outside, from inside the room. A low voice played. "We died without permission, and so we were not recorded. That was the price of dying free." Volker turned toward the speaker. "There's no power feed. Nothing is on. No generator. No cogitator." "Then what's speaking?" Brint asked. The answer came not from the Vox, but from the wall behind us. New words, scraped with fresh blood across the inner hatch. "If no one remembers, we never disobeyed." And that's when we realized the seal wasn't to keep them in. It was to keep us out, so we wouldn't learn the final heresy of Krieg, that to be human is to be remembered by someone else's hands. The descent ended in silence. Not the absence of sound, but its burial. Like something beneath had swallowed even the concept of noise. We stepped into the final chamber listed on our trench map. Designation, Reliquary K Delta. Last logged over a century ago. No recent activity, no access records. And yet, the door was open, not broken, not forced, opened inward. Volk led with torchlight. The chamber was circular, domed, reinforced with alloyed stonecrete and golden ribbing. Regulation cathedral pattern, imperial standard. That's what made it worse, because it looked perfect. Krieg doesn't build perfect. We build necessity, not sanctity. We forge trenches, not temples. But this place was beautiful. The pillars were polished. The air smelled of incense, real incense, not chemical, real frankincense. And in the center stood a towering statue of the Emperor, or something pretending to be him. "Muriwa," Kraus muttered first. "Why does he have 6 wings?" Volk stepped forward, counted. 6, he confirmed. 3 on each side. Not possible, not doctrinal. The Codex Iconographia allows for only 2 variants, seated or triumphant. This was neither. The face was covered by a golden veil, but beneath the veil, the hint of teeth showed, too long, too many. Langer examined the engravings. Holy script, but misaligned, twisted, each phrase just slightly off from proper High Gothic. The light that watches below. May his wings enfold the soil, Sacrifice is joy. Brint touched the altar, withdrawing immediately, surprised. It's warm, he said. The candles were lit, fresh wax, still dripping. No one had been here, according to our auspex. And yet, this chapel was active.
Kraus pointed to the walls, skulls embedded in prayer niches, Krieg pattern. But each one had the aquila scratched out of their helm, not weathered, deliberately carved away. And behind the altar, a book, not sealed, opened. Its pages handwritten in a deep crimson ink, too dark to be standard. Falk read the first line aloud. Solemn, we offered blood to the Emperor. He offered a face. It was not the one we knew, but it smiled, and we obeyed. Langer pulled the page up, found another line. Do not speak his name in daylight. He listens better in the dark. Kraus turned pale, shakily. That's not worship, he said. Gravely. No, Falk replied. That's a correction. Someone changed him. The statue's eyes began to weep. Not blood, not oil, ash, dry ash flaking down the golden faceplate like tears ground from bone. Then we heard it, from the walls, from the vox, from ourselves, a whisper layered in 3 tones. You've been kneeling to the wrong one. The torchlight dimmed, not because of power loss, because something else was brightening. Behind the altar, in the corner, a Krieg banner, but instead of the Emperor's sigil was a mirror, cracked, tarnished, and etched with one phrase. If you see yourself down here, you are already praying. Brint dropped his rifle. Falk picked it up for him, didn't speak, just looked at the statue again. And this time it smiled, wide, long, endless. And we understood. We had died for him, but not the right him. We posted a watch, standard rotation, no more than 30 minutes each. Anything longer, and the dreams started pulling harder than exhaustion ever could. Not dreams, visions, because when we finally rested, even briefly, we all dreamed the same thing, removing our masks, not just taking them off, craving it. The sound of clasps loosening, the feel of straps falling down our cheeks, the rush of unfiltered air. We dreamed it like a man dreams drowning might feel like flying. The mask wasn't protection anymore. It was a prison. Falk said he dreamed of a mirror, one bolted to the inside of his helmet. He could see his eyes, just his eyes, but they were someone else's. Watching, judging, weeping. He couldn't look away. Brint said he dreamed of dirt, filling the mask from the inside. No matter how much he screamed, it kept pouring, grain by grain. He tasted Krieg in every breath. I dreamed of home, but I've never seen home. None of us have. We're born in vats, in shadow. Yet I stood on soil that wasn't mud, saw a sky that wasn't grey, and I took my mask off. Because I could. I smiled, I wept, I breathed, and then I woke. So did the others, one at a time, except Kraus. He didn't respond to his wake rotation. Falk checked him. Still breathing, he said. Still warm. But his mask was gone. Not damaged, not ripped. Unbuckled. Set gently beside him like an offering. Falk reached to rouse him, then froze. Kraus's eyes opened, slow, blinking once. He sat up. No coughing, no screaming, no blood from the lungs. Just a long, peaceful exhale, as if waking from the best sleep of his life. We stared. He stared back, then said, I saw the sky. His voice was wrong. Still his tone, still his pitch, but no static, no rasp, no rebreather filters.
And that wasn't possible, not down here. The air is laced with corpse mold, chemical spill, and trench rot.
You can't breathe it, not even once.
Kraus stood, unsteady, but smiling. Brint stepped forward, hand on laserful. Kraus, mask up. Kraus tilted his head. There's no poison in the air, he said. Only in us. Langer checked the scanner. No toxins, no contagion, no gas signatures. Which made it worse, because there should have been something. Kraus looked down at the mask. I don't want it anymore, he said. Then he walked to the wall, sat down, crossed his legs, and closed his eyes. No resistance, no protest. Like a man waiting for the next dream to start, wide awake. We didn't speak for several minutes. Then Falk whispered, "How long do you think we've already been dreaming?" No one answered, because no one was sure this part wasn't the dream too.
We were down to 5. Kraus hadn't moved in hours. Still breathing, still smiling, eyes closed, like he was watching a holovid only he could see. Falk refused to let anyone touch him, said waking him might wake something else. So we moved on. And that's when we saw them. 2 Brints, standing face to face. Same armor, same rust stains on the boots, same chip on the left shoulder pad, same scar above the right brow, even the same breathing pattern. Both turned to us at once. Falk raised his las rifle. Bors did too. One of the Brints raised his hands. Don't shoot. I don't know what this is, but I'm me. The other Brint turned to him, skeptical. Say something only I would know. The first one paused, thoughtful, then said, softly, "You used to say you saw things in the mist, even before Krieg." The second one flinched, agitated. "I never said that." "Triumphant, exactly," the first replied. "That's how I know you're not me." The second looked panicked, frantic. "I've never said that. That's not something I would..." Falka snapped. "Enough!" He pointed to Brint 1. "The first one. That's our Brint."
Bors hesitated, then nodded. He raised his laser rifle and fired. No warning, no pause. One Brint dropped. Throat burned through. No scream, just a hiss of escaping breath. But as he fell, he locked eyes with me, and his lips moved, just once. "Why me?" Then he died. The other Brint, the one who was supposed to be real, dropped to his knees, hands shaking. "I didn't lie. I didn't lie." Falk looked down. "Then why are you crying?" The survivor looked up. "I don't know if I'm real anymore." No one moved. Then Langer pointed to the corpse. It was fading, not decomposing, unwriting. His body dissolved like dust in zero gravity, lifted into the air, particle by particle. Gone. No bones, no gear, no trace, not even blood. Just one thing left behind. A Krieg regiment tag. Not Brint's. Someone else's. D-32 recycle unit, 4th gen. No match. Low records. Nothing in our files. Falk picked it up. Looked to Brint. "You weren't a recycle unit." "No. Then he wasn't you." Brint didn't speak, but his hands didn't stop shaking. That night, no one slept. Even Kraus opened his eyes once, watching intently. Watched Brint from across the trench wall. Didn't blink, didn't breathe, just watched. And in the quiet, I heard the Vox crackle with a sound I can't forget. "There is only one of you, but you'll wish there were 2. So someone else could take the shot." We found the nest beneath Sector 9C, not marked on any map, accessed only by crawling through a vent so narrow I tore my mask seal getting through. It repressurized on the other side, which should have been impossible. But that stopped mattering hours ago. The air inside the chamber was sweet. Not chemical sweet, not rotting. Like perfume. Like the kind we weren't allowed to think about. Folk stepped in first. Torchlight caught the walls. And we saw them. Symbols. Runes. Smeared in thick black pitch. Each one looping back into itself. Each one facing the ceiling. Boars whispered, "These weren't written for us." Then we saw the bodies, not arranged, not stacked, nailed, to the ceiling. Dozens, maybe more. All Krieg, all upside down, like they'd been hung in reflection. Their helmets removed, their faces scraped smooth, no features, just skin, stretched tight like wax cooling in a mold.
Falca snapped.
Burn it, all of it, now. We readied incendiaries. Brint primed the charge. I lit the pilot line with my cutter. The flame ignited, then reversed, upward, not rising, climbing, like it remembered how it was created and wanted to unmake itself. It ran backwards along the line to the charge and didn't explode. It inhaled. The fire folded in on itself, curled inward, formed a ring, hovered in the air. And from the ring came sound. Not screams, not music, not even words. Chant. The same phrase, again and again. He warms the soil. He drinks the ash. The deeper you go, the closer you are. Over and over. Falca dropped the detonator, backed away. "Vox it in," Bors ordered. We tried. No signal. Then the Vox lit on its own. Falca's voice, recorded from an hour ago. "Burn it, all of it, now."
Then mine.
Do we even know what fire does anymore? Except I never said that. Not out loud. Brint turned to me, surprised. "You didn't say that." I didn't. We heard something move, above, not footsteps. Dripping. Dripping. We looked up. The nailed corpses were bleeding, but not red, not black. Orange. Fire, liquid fire, trickling from their mouths like oil from a ruptured pipe. Brint screamed. Pointed. The pitch on the walls was bubbling, boiling, then forming letters again. New words, fresh. Loudly, "Fire is the final memory." We ran, didn't argue, didn't log it, didn't speak. Only once, as we fled, I turned back. The fire ring was still hovering, now wider, now louder, and the chant had changed. It whispered, "The heat never leaves. It only waits for flesh to believe again."
We stopped to the rest hollow, 2 levels down.
Soil was thick, wet, warmer than it should have been. Almost soft, like something exhaled beneath it. Folk set the rotation. No one spoke, no one volunteered. We simply folded into place, like puppets set back in their chest. Even Kraus leaned against the wall and didn't blink. Then Langer looked up. Stopped chewing. Raised his torch. There were faces, not carved, not sculpted by enemy hands, molded from the trench mud. The same trench mud we walked through every hour. Faces, dozens, shaped from clay into the wall, watching us in silence. All Krieg, helmets, respirator masks, even goggles, recreated from wire and rock slivers and stitched bark, but wrong, familiar, because they were us. Folk's profile, Brint's rebreather dent, Bors's cheek scar, Langer's broken eyepiece, my own twisted jawline.
Each one perfectly formed, like a death mask pressed into earth, made by a hand that knew every line.
We froze. No one spoke, not even a breath. Then Langer backed up and kicked something soft, more clay. He unwrapped it, a half-formed version of himself, cradled in a trench coat, fingers still curled around a rusted auspex. Bors raised his rifle, annoyed. What the hell is this? Kraus, still seated, looked up slowly and smiled. Thoughtful. Faith, he said. They made us in their image. Falk grabbed his collar, angry. Who made these, Kraus? Kraus looked at the wall, relaxed. The mud did. Brint shouted, surprised. No one sculpted these? You think this dirt just decided to remember our faces? Langer scanned the ceiling. Whisper. No enemy markings, no cult signs, no tools, just thumbprints. I stepped forward, studied one of the clay faces. It blinked, only once, then sagged back into mud like a whisper forgotten mid-prayer. Falca backed away. All of you, sound off. We're moving. Now. That's when Bors shouted, Where's my hands? We looked. They were coated, wrist deep in wet clay, fresh, thick, still warm. He dropped his laser gun. I didn't touch anything. Falca pulled his auspex, checked mine, checked Langer's. Same readings. Clay under our nails, mud under our sleeves. We'd all touched the wall. We'd all made the faces. And none of us remembered doing it. Falca whispered, What were we thinking about when we stopped here? No one answered, because none of us remembered that either. Just a memory of pressure, of fingers molding, smoothing, building someone else's face into a wall so they wouldn't be forgotten. Then the vox crackled, distorted and wet. We sculpt what we fear losing. We sculpt what we wish we were. You're not praying, you're trying to become. We left the hollow in silence. But as we passed the last sculpted face, one not yet crumbled, I could have sworn it smiled. Not like joy, like recognition. And I still don't know if it recognized me, or what's wearing my face now.
We didn't notice at first. Vox static is normal underground.
Half the time, it's just bleed from collapsing relay towers or echo bands. But this wasn't static. This was structured. At 0300 trench time, while resting near a rusted junction hub, the Vox burst to life. No activation, no call-in, just a tone. Then a voice. Our voice operator, Private Tors. He hadn't spoken aloud in hours, typical Krieg, disciplined, silent, functional. But the Vox crackled with his voice, unfiltered. Not through the mouthpiece, through the channel, solemn. This is Private Tors, 144th Krieg Siege Regiment, Subsector 19B, Trench Line Echo 27. Confession begins now. Falk shouted from the corner. Tors, shut it down. That's a secure frequency. Tors didn't move. He just stood. Back to the squad. Vox pack glowing dull green, disconnected from the trench relay entirely. Still, his voice kept streaming into our headsets. We removed them. It kept going.
We bombed the civvies first. We told command we hadn't seen the shelters, but we had. They waved.
Falk ran forward, grabbed Tors' shoulder, spun him around. The Vox pack was open. No wires, no power cell, no speaker. just torn pages from a Krieg liturgical codex, folded into the signal repeater slot. Bors read them aloud. Repentance is clarity. Clarity is confession. Confession is worship. Folk shouted again. Tors! Who gave you that order? Tors turned his head, mouth sealed shut, but the Vox still spoke. The heresy isn't outside. It's in us. It was us. It is still us. Brint went to destroy the Vox pack. Folk ordered him to stop. Then the voice changed, still Tors, but deeper, still using Krieg syntax, still in perfect liturgical rhythm, but warped. Blessed are the shells that break discipline. Blessed are the wounds that unright loyalty. We bled in vain. We bled to stay sane. Tors's nose began to bleed, black, not red, thick like ink, pooling onto his chest plate. Then his mouth opened, wider than it should have, too wide, like his jaw no longer understood structure. And the voice now came from both the Vox and his throat, in sync, in stereo. You buried us in silence. We answer in tongues. Falk gave the order. Brint fired, one clean shot, through the throat. Tors collapsed, still twitching, but the Vox finally fell silent, until the backup unit crackled to life, and a new voice spoke. Mine. This is Trooper, redacted, 144th Krieg Siege Regiment, Subsector 19B, Trench Line, Echo 27. Confession begins now. Except I hadn't spoken. I hadn't touched a transmitter. Folk looked at me, thoughtful. I need you to tell me the truth. I didn't, annoyed. He pointed his lasgun. I said, tell me the truth. But I didn't know it anymore. Whispering because the voice kept talking, from the Vox, from the walls, from the blood-streaked pages. It wasn't just scripture. It wasn't just confession. It was doctrine, and it all ended with one repeated line. We are the heresy. We are the heresy. We are the heresy. We hadn't seen Pure in 3 shifts. No one questioned it. Krieg units don't mourn until the body is found, preferably in uniform, preferably still holding a shovel. But this time, he didn't die. We found him crouched beside a collapsed service node, somewhere below trench level, right at the edge of sump depth. He was alive, breathing, helmet intact, still clutching his entrenching tool. But he wasn't digging into the soil. He was digging into himself. Through the uniform, through the armor, through the ribcage, straight into the meat. And he wasn't screaming. He was focused, like he was uncovering something buried. A map, a memory, a relic. Every breath came sharp through the Vox, but even distorted, we could hear the deeper. Falk ran forward, tried to stop him, grabbed the spade. Pure yanked it back with surprising strength, like the hole was defending itself. We forced him down, took 5 of us. Brint tried to pull his arm back, but it wouldn't come free. Pure's hand was still inside himself, buried up to the wrist. Falk removed the chest plate, then gagged. There was nothing inside. No blood, no lungs, no organs, just soil. Black, dense, with tiny metal fragments, like teeth, like shell casings. Falk backed away. He's full of Krieg. Brint looked up, thoughtful. No, he's full of where we were born. Pure smiled, then said clearly, calmly, I found the orders. What orders? Falk snapped. Pure lifted the entrenching tool. Something stuck to it, folded, stained, paper. We took it, unfolded it. A deployment slip, authentic, stamped, signed, with our squad's ID. Dated 7 years before the war began. and signed by my name. But I hadn't been born yet. Folk scanned it, surprised. This says we were sent here before Krieg was cleared for habitation. Brint stepped away. The war hadn't even started. We looked back at Pure.
He was staring into the hole in his chest, mesmerized.
"It's in all of us," he whispered. "We're full of the soil. We were always meant to dig it out." Then he reached again, deeper. We didn't stop him. This time, we let him dig, because part of us wanted to know. Part of us wanted to find what he found, even if it was ourselves. And I swear, just before his hand vanished into the hole again, I saw fingers reaching up to meet his.
The colonel had died 2 months ago.
We saw it. Firsthand. Orbital strike. Bunker collapse. Blood mist in the trench before we even felt the shockwave. There was no grave, no corpse. Just a charred bolt pistol and a melted rank pin embedded in the ruin. We collected what was left, burned it again for good measure. Krieg tradition. Ensure no part of the flesh returns uncommanded. And yet, as we moved deeper into the earth, the Vox began whispering in short bursts again. Just fragments. "Delta Obsidian. Hold the line. All units. Reinforced until obedience is memory. 144th. Final transmission begins now." Folk froze mid-stride. That's the colonel's cadence. He was right. Not just the voice, the rhythm, the breathing, the pauses between syllables. But this time, it wasn't coming from the Vox. It was coming from me. I didn't feel my lips move, but the words emerged anyway.
This is Colonel Vaughn, 144th Krieg Siege Regiment. Authorization, final voice print. All units, kneel.
The squad turned to me. Falk raised his Lars rifle. "You say that again, trooper. I fire." I tried to reply, tried to say, "I'm not speaking." But instead, my mouth opened, and his voice came out. "Kneel. Show the soil you still remember." My legs buckled, not from pain, not from weakness, but from command. My knees hit the dirt like they remembered it before I did. Brint shouted, Bors aimed, Falk grabbed me by the collar, dragged me upright, forced me to face the wall, to see myself in the rusted reflection of a half-melted Auspex shell. And then I saw it. My lips moving, but not under my control. "Falk," I whispered, except it was the colonel's voice again. "You disobeyed. You saw too much." Falk screamed, slammed me into the wall. "Who are you? Say your own name." I tried, but nothing came. Only more orders. "We were never meant to return."
We are Krieg's last prayer.
Spoken in error, the Emperor has already turned his gaze away. Then, in a flash, I felt it. Like the cold breath of something old and buried, exhaling behind my eyes. A second heartbeat. Not in my chest, in my throat. Falk looked terrified. "You're not him, but he's in there, isn't he?" I wanted to answer, but again the colonel's voice spoke through me. "If they hear, they'll remember. If they remember, they'll question. If they question, they'll bury us again." I fell to my knees, not because of control this time, because I couldn't stand under the weight of my own voice. Brint turned off his helmet mic, thoughtful. "Should we execute him?" Falk didn't respond. He just placed the colonel's melted rank pin on the dirt beside me, then whispered, "You carry him now, but don't think we won't end you too." And for a moment, I almost begged them to, but then the voice whispered in my ear, not the colonel, not me, not Krieg, something deeper, something in the soil. "You've just been promoted."
It began with a cough.
Brint leaned against the tunnel wall after a silent march through ash-choked corridors where even the air tasted burnt. We didn't stop often. We weren't supposed to. Movement meant control. Stillness meant the voices got closer. But Brint, he didn't want to move anymore. He unstrapped his rebreather, breathed in deep, didn't flinch. "Feels like home," he muttered. We stared at him. Falk stepped forward. "Mask on. That's an order." Brint looked up, eyes wet. "You ever break orders, sir?" Falk didn't answer. Brint stood straighter. "I have." He unbuttoned the neck of his trench coat, revealed the brand on his chest. Old, scarred over, still legible. Coward 942.M41. Boars froze. Falk whispers, "Where did you get that?" Brint's voice was calm, flat like he'd rehearsed this. Kassoon Prime, 18 years ago, fell back during a push, only one who lived. I kept my mouth shut. Command couldn't prove it, but the commissar had me marked anyway. He ran his fingers across the scar. Spent the next 10 years trying to earn it back. No one moved. Then the wall behind him moved first. At first it was just dust, loose rock, crumbling earth. Then hands. Not real ones. Stone, molded from packed soil. Human-shaped, but with fingers too long and too many of them. They grabbed his shoulders. He screamed. We raised our weapons, but Falk held out his hand. "Don't. Krieg remembers." Brint thrashed. "I confessed. Isn't that what you want? You want truth. There it is." The wall's fingers twisted. Brint's voice broke. "I came back. I fought for you. I never ran again." The hands pulled him back, not down, into the wall, into the trench's skin. The soil swallowed him like breath pulled into lungs. His shovel hit the floor, still warm. We waited, 30 seconds, a minute. Then the wall pulsed again, and out came bones, clean, polished, stacked into the symbol of the double-headed Aquila, but with no wings. Falker stepped forward, placed his hand on the dirt where Brint vanished, thoughtful. He didn't die for the Emperor. Then he turned to us, gravelly. He died for Krieg, and Krieg doesn't forget or forgive. We resumed marching. The wall didn't speak again, but when I passed that patch of soil, I swear, I felt my own skin itch, like something behind it remembered more than I did, and was waiting for me to admit it. We stopped marching when the ash reached our knees. Not from fatigue. Krieg doesn't grant that luxury. It was the sound that stopped us, the kind of silence that isn't empty, but full, thick, crowded, breathing in all directions at once. We'd entered a crypt, or maybe something that used to be one. Every wall, ceiling, and floor was caked in grey powder, not dirt, bone dust. Falk turned in place, Auspex sweeping. Nothing, but we heard it anyway. Footsteps, not behind us, beneath us. One by one, we all stopped, not because we heard the same thing, because we each heard something different. Falk dropped to one knee. "Colonel Vaughn," voice print confirmed. I turned. His helmet was off, eyes wide, listening to a voice none of us could hear. Boars started shaking, gripped his shovel so hard the handle snapped. "No," he whispered. "No, I didn't. There was no other way. He was bleeding out." He looked at me. I left him, back on Ispo Vive. I never said anything. The walls breathed in. We didn't move. And then, long pause. We heard them. Thousands. Footsteps. Marching. Boots on mud. Muffled by dust. Endless. Layered over each other like sediment. Brint's voice came from the ash at our feet. Except Brint was gone. Commanding, "Report, trooper," a second voice followed, demanding name, number, last command. Then a third, intense, "Did you hesitate?" The air thickened. I felt it in my lungs. The weight of wars we weren't part of, sieges we'd never fought, retreats never recorded, victories never rewarded, just bones and dust and shovels full of names no longer assigned. Falk dropped his las gun, stared ahead like the Emperor himself had spoken. "He remembers us," I whispered. "Who?" He didn't answer, because the answer was everywhere. The walls groaned,
Not with pressure, with remembrance. Every death on Krieg, every regiment dissolved, every soldier executed for cowardice, every martyr written into footnotes. Their voices were in the dust now, and the dust wanted out. The ground split beneath us. Ash swallowed Bors up to the waist. Falk dragged him free, but when we pulled him up, he was screaming. Not in pain, in prayer. "Ave Imperator, Lord of Terror, Ave Krieg, forgive my lapse, Ave my rank, Ave my mask, Ave my war, Ave my sin." He repeated it, again, again, until his voice wasn't his, until the chant came from everywhere. Ash from the floor rose upward, spiraling around us in storm funnels of bone and smoke. I raised my weapon, fired, pointless. The dust didn't move to kill, it moved to remember. It pressed against our helmets, our armor, our names. 144th Echo Detachment, faltered, forgotten, found again. Then silence. All ash fell. The light from our lanterns faded. And in the stillness, we realized we were buried. No sky, no exit, no command, no name. Just the sound of every Krieg soul ever lost, breathing with us. Falk whispered, "Are we dead?" I answered, "Not yet." And then, "Soon." They pulled me out with servo claws and broken prayers. Not because they were looking for me, because they were looking for the dead. The excavation team found the signal, faint, looping, my name. But I hadn't spoken, not since the collapse. The last image I saw, before the ceiling came down, was Falk's helmet floating in ash. Not falling, rising, like something had exhaled upward and taken him with it. I woke to flood lamps and red purity seals slapping in the wind. Krieg medicals in full hazmat suits, a commissar standing over me, eyes unreadable behind his lenses. He didn't salute, just asked one question. "What happened down there?" I stared past him, into the sky, not because I missed it, but because I didn't believe it was real. Then I said it, not whispered, not screamed, just spoken, calm, certain. "I died down there. This is just the echo." He didn't speak again. He turned to the Medicae. "Stern, scrub his tags, transfer to 4th Penitent redeployment, unmarked." They wheeled me past the crater. I looked over the edge. Nothing remained. No tunnel, no blood, no weapons. Just a hole that looked too perfect to be natural, too empty to be abandoned. I reached for my mask. It was still sealed, not a crack on it. But the lenses were fogged from the inside. My own breath felt wrong, too even, too still. I looked at my hands, flesh, muscle, bone. But they didn't ache, they didn't even tremble, as if they'd forgotten how to belong to a body, as if they were waiting for an order. I climbed off the stretcher. No one stopped me. I walked into the mist just beyond the outer line, past the servitors, past the trenches, past the wire, into the fog. And before it swallowed me, I heard one voice again. Not Falk,
Not the colonel, not even the one I'd learned to call my own. Gravelly voice. You weren't rescued, you were released. I didn't look back. Krieg doesn't allow that, and what's behind me was never mine to remember. If this transmission reached you, you are not alone. The trenches remember, the fog watches, and the echo never ends. Subscribe to Void-Born Terrors and return to the dark, where memory screams and loyalty dies slowly. Like, share, bear witness.